Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 93 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I've got our regular co-hosts, Ben Toth from Page Hungry, Ian Kummer from Moscow, and Carlo Parcelli from Washington, D.C. We are still waiting on our special guest today. It will be Alex Suarez. He's an expert on Latin America. He wants to talk about some Assange issues. But in the meantime, while we are waiting for him, we did have some clips regarding, is this the European election clips, Ben, or what kind of clips?
No, well, first of all, I'm just the only European, so we got 3 Americans, and I'm back from whatever assignment you told the viewers I was on. And it's 4th of July. Well, the next day it is, so happy Independence Day to you guys. And I thought maybe we should start there because, there was the Independence Day in Belarus we talked about before the stream, which was the 3rd of July, the only post-Soviet country that celebrates on the day of liberation from the Nazis, not the day they left the Soviet Union. And after that, Lukashenko went to the SCO summit in Astana. So our first clip is something I've never, ever seen before, which is the Azadi Tower in Tehran, right? In Iran, lit up in the flags of new SCO 10 member Belarus. Apparently, there was another apartment complex also in Hanoi, in Vietnam, lit up. So yeah, the East is completely on the same page. But as for your 4th of July, I wanted to start by, you don't have to guess this one because the colors will be on screen, I think, pretty much immediately. But for me, this is just so cringe. I wonder how you guys feel about this one. I wonder if you've seen it. Have a quick.
Is that Blinken?
I'm not sure you actually want to watch the whole thing, or should I continue?
No.
Yeah,
no,
that's an official Ukrainian armed forces. I don't know what PR flick, but this one I had a hard time, and we had a poll among some friends, like, where is this? And it was interesting. 10 points for anybody who can guess where these parents, children, they don't care one bit about the rain to celebrate the 4th of July.
Where is this? I can't even.
Yeah, I can give you a small hint. It's not a big crowd, so it's not a big country.
Is this Estonia?
No, this is Pristina, Kosovo. You know, the most colonized place I think on the planet. So
right outside of Camp Bondsteel.
Yes, the previously largest NATO base before Ramstein. Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was a nice kind of celebratory way to get started. But before Alex get here, what we have obviously in Europe and also across the pond, you guys are in the middle of some big shenanigans, our elections. It seems to be what everybody's starting talking about. And I thought I could launch everybody on a little bit, some details on the British one, which concluded yesterday, right? So we have the final results today, and pretty much this is the British election where a lot of the press, including in the US, said Labour landslide, Circus, wow, everything's going to change. It's a hopey changey thing. So it's like the Obama thing. And it was the lowest turnout on record, right? Since 1970, 57. And out of that, I think 37 voted for Labour. And if you kind of add those up, 0.57 times 0.3, it's 1/5 of the population, or 20%. That's one of the British dailies called it a sad landslide, a loveless landslide. That's it. It's a good description. Because on the right hand, you see a YouGov poll where people can type in any justification, one justification they had for voting Labour. And as you can see, most of them were just to get the fucking Tories out. By the way, just to be fair, 1% said they don't trust Rishi Sunak, and 1% voted for Keir Starmer's leadership. Yeah, there's some good news and some bad news. Liz Truss, who survived the life of a lettuce, or the other way around, is out. Jacob Rees-Mogg is out. Unfortunately, George Galloway is out. He didn't spend too much time in government. Jeremy Corbyn's back in as an independent, and that big mouth guy who can say all the things other people can, the head of the independent party, he's in.
Nigel Farage.
Farage is in,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't see any huge changes. But that was the Independence Day. Most of the world celebrates it from Britain, including you guys, so they had to celebrate on
we got Alex.
on your Independence Day. And just as we got to that, by the way, any thoughts on that? Alex has joined the waiting room.
It was really nice to see all of our vassals licking our boots. Our vassals in Kosovo and where was the other place?
Well, that was Ukraine. That was Ukraine and Armed Forces, high value production. Yeah.
Alex, thanks so much for joining us this morning for me. I don't think it's morning for anyone else. You're up probably on East Coast time. It's afternoon over there, Alex.
We can't hear you. You're not muted here. You're not muted here, but we can't hear you. Damn these technical issues, eh?
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Okay, we'll add you back in.
We'll wait for you to get that sorted out.
I
wanted to comment on the vassals. Just I don't know, what is that? You know, what why do they want? They're just showing support for the United States because the United States is a great country. Like in Ukraine, just allowing the people of Ukraine to die by the hundreds of thousands for nothing. I mean, they're just being sacrificed. They're not going to get anything out of this. And so you would hope that they would be angry with the U.S.
I think they're beginning to, but this comes from a high production value video from the top. So I think they're still trying to appease the US as much as possible. But I don't know where I read this, and it was years ago, there was this questionnaire of if there's a war, how will it go? And they asked it in the regular, dominated countries. They asked it in South Korea, Estonia. They asked it in Australia. And the most common answer was, well, of course, the Americans will come and defend us. That's why they do all this shit. I think Kosovo has to be the same. We're going to show we're exactly like you, so you can come and defend us. And the Ukrainians should have a bitter discovery by this time, by 2.5 years in this, that ain't happening. But I think that's the explanation. Alex, do you want to say something so we can make sure we hear you?
Yeah, you can hear me all right now, comrades?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. I know kind of the impetus behind your being a guest on this episode was that we had a guest on a couple shows ago, Chris Black, and he was a little bit disparaging of Assange, and he had a kind of a different take on who Assange is and what he represented. We were all a little surprised by that take. But I know you have some pretty close ties with Assange and his family, and you have some strong opinions. But we would very much like to hear your thoughts on the whole thing. Like, I mean, all of us here on the panel think it's great news that he was released after 14 years of illegitimate and just despicable treatment. But I would just love to throw it to you and hear you talk about the whole. From wherever you want to start.
Lay it on us.
Name me a prisoner that was held at Belmarsh who prior to that had only ever been convicted of skipping bail. You've had, rapists, murderers who could afford, powerful attorneys who were bailed out. And they denied him bail, up until the end. So that says it all. Prior to this, he was only ever convicted of skipping bail, and he was skipping bail to try to avoid being persecuted by the courts in what is known as lawfare. And that's why ultimately he took asylum in accordance with international law in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. It was a 14-year process, as you mentioned. It all started a year after some of his most powerful revelations in 2011. A lot of the WikiLeaks revelations that he helped reveal in 2010 and 2011 helped spark movements, right? The Arab Spring movements, the legitimate ones, the Indignados movement in Spain, Occupy, which I took part in.
This is
I'm an early. Go ahead.
the light 'em up Apache gunship video, right? That's the most memorable from that era. That was the one that really pissed some people off. Or
Well,
more
also,
than that.
diplomatic cables, in Latin America, even rebellions in Latin America or Pakistan. I mean, pick any country on the map almost, and there was some, when I say pick any country, I mean pick any major event since 2010, where governments were changing, and there was some influence from WikiLeaks revelations there. So it was highly influential. It helped spark movements, revealing the truth to the masses. And I think a lot of you know that I'm a supporter of the Huru movement. And I'm not saying this is a position that the Huru movement takes, but there are certain individuals from rank and file and black leftists, whatever you want to call them, that have been critical of Assange. I didn't really see his name's Chris Black, the gentleman you interviewed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only heard about it. I didn't really get to see it. I've been very busy. But some of the criticism of Assange, for example, and I'm going to be on a show tonight with Comrade Jamar about this, is that he has the white savior complex. So when he's showing corruption in Africa or the Middle East, that, he kind of wants to take credit for that. And that's nothing could be further from the truth. What he has done for the purpose of transparency is show to the masses the truth, and then the masses themselves decide what to do. And he sacrificed himself as a result. And the deal that he took in Saipan, even Snowden has called a victory, because the United States had to admit the only thing he did wrong was the act of journalism. And the judge, who was a Micronesian judge in the U.S. colony of Saipan before Assange returned to Australia, was very, very friendly to him. She said, I want to wish you an early happy birthday, and gave him leeway to speak freely, to say, look, I don't think I violated the First Amendment. I think the Espionage Act contradicts the First Amendment. This is what I did. And they took that deal. And, so that's the only other criticism I've heard, that it was a sellout of taking that deal. They wanted him 6 feet under. I think we
all agree. Some people wanted to get rid of him. Absolutely.
They wanted him dead. And, so in that sense, it was a victory, I think.
Well, I mean, of course, it was a victory for him. I mean, getting out of prison, and I fully expected him to be eventually renditioned to the United States and tortured for another several decades. I mean, that just seemed like what was in the cards. So, thankfully, that didn't happen. But we mentioned about the Ecuadorian embassy, and I think probably that case had a lot, with taking refuge in the embassy in London, probably had a lot to do with the West's overthrowing the government in Ecuador of what was that guy's name?
What you mean, the not the?
Well, Correa was not overthrown.
Correa.
Lenny Moreno took over.
Let me answer the question, though, because I understand why he's confusing them. Because it's a little complicated. I'll explain it very, very, very quick. So what happened with Rafael Correa is his presidential term lapsed, so he had to step down, and he had two vice presidents of his former vice presidents that took over. One of them was a leftist who supported Assange, named Jorge Glass. He became the VP, and the other one, who was the traitor, was Lenin Moreno.
With the name of Lenin, for fuck's sake, yeah.
Right, exactly. So just like you saw in Peru with Dina Boluarte, who was one of Pedro Castillo's former vice presidents, betrayed him, that's what happened in Ecuador. So when Lenin Moreno took over, he put Jorge Glass, his own vice president, behind bars. Correa had to go into exile, and then he went after Assange and permitted the British to enter the embassy, and also gave Galapagos, which is a highly sensitive environmental territory, over to the United States. He let the United States build a base there, took an IMF loan that Ecuadorians didn't even need, that they're suffering a crisis now as a result. So Lenin Moreno was a total sellout, and the next guy after him was a right winger, full on right winger. I mean, Lenin Moreno was a right winger who infiltrated Correa's party, if you want to be honest. But yeah, that's what ended up happening. That brought in 5 years ago to the conditions for Assange to be able to be extracted from the embassy.
And Belmarsh Prison, like you mentioned, isn't like a minimum facility for white collar and people who skip bail. Like it's like the Guantanamo of Britain, kind of.
It's like
high
that's
security.
where the infamous East End gangsters, the Cray brothers, were held for murder in Belmarsh. It's a hardcore prison. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, everybody is glad Assange is out. But I want to talk about a little bit, because part of the problem where, some of the criticisms of Assange comes down to his partisanship within the U.S. domestic politics. And I think a lot of people were upset with him when, he was the DNC emails, right? Wasn't he accused of working with Russia to release the DNC emails? And then there was a guy named Seth Rich that ended up, getting murdered. And there was a lot of discussion about, Seth Rich was perhaps the person that leaked these DNC emails to Assange. But definitely Hillary Clinton, said she wanted him dead. And she was not happy about how he was, releasing these documents, which was causing difficulty for the Democratic Party. And it was benefiting Trump. And also some of Trump's inner circle visited Assange, I believe, in the embassy. So this led to a lot of criticism. But can you walk us through that? Are you like an expert on these topics? The Seth Rich issue and the DNC email leaks.
Absolutely, I am. As a matter of fact, I know Sean Lucas's boss, Elizabeth Lee Beck. Sean Lucas and Seth Rich, they said, were the whistleblowers. I can't say I know that for certain, but there was 2 mysterious deaths in DC around the same time, both by staffers that had access to the things that WikiLeaks ultimately got. More prominent than Sean Lucas was Seth Rich, because Assange at one point, I believe in a tweet, had said he was going to offer a certain amount of money for any information into his death. But yeah, Hillary Clinton literally said in an email to a group of generals, why don't we just drone this guy, talking about Assange. And U.S. citizens in Yemen, including in mine.
Oh, your
We
audio
lost
just,
you.
the audio went out. We can still see you, but the audio just stopped. Unfortunately.
They wanted to cut your line.
Yes, it's the deep state. The deep state cut your audio. Yes.
Okay, hopefully he'll come back. So I never even heard of Sean Lucas.
Yes.
That's crazy. So hopefully he'll be able to explain that. So, I mean, that was the speculation, right? So Assange was protecting his sources, and he never did say explicitly who it was. And I'm hoping now that he's, free, I'm hoping he'll be able to talk and explain what went down. But then again, maybe, part of the deal is you can't talk about these things if we let you out. So we'll see. But everybody thought that it had to have been because they said it was Russia, right? Russian hackers released these emails, and we knew it was insiders, disgruntled insiders.
Can I interject? Immediately as that came out, the Russian hacker thing, I think that week the transfer speed was too fast. It had to go to a pen drive because there's no such internet connection. It was too fast to get all that stuff off. And immediately was proved, that couldn't have gone to Russia. And therefore came maybe someone's a Russian agent. Yeah.
No, it's true. There was some high-tech analysis done, some open source analysis, and they talked about the impossibility that Guccifer 2.0 was an actual Russian agent. That it was, it had to have been a CIA cutout because the Cyrillic template was added to the thing to put fingerprints on it to make it look like it was Russian hackers, and that was added after the drive was already extracted. So, but that was Veterans of Intelligence Personnel for Sanity. I don't know, the VIP. But yeah, no, this is unfortunate, the technical difficulties, but we're always having to navigate these, it seems. So
I want to ask Alex if he's still listening while dealing with the technical problems, because you laid it out as that was the point when he became hated and hunted. I wonder if he agrees. I wonder if he has a different, explanation. What was it? Because, he was at, not the Met Gala, but he was at these events in the high society with some stars before that. He was part of, the up crowd for a while. I wonder what was the point when he fell from grace.
Celebrated. Yes. Until it became partisan.
And he's back. Well, the thing is too is as far as the whole accusations of partisanship, and that's such a common line of attack that's used by these various, I wouldn't even call them leftists, like pseudo leftists. They say, well, it's very much if you're not with us, you're against us. We picked for you that, Democrats are the lesser of two evils. So if you do not vote blue, no matter who, you're literally a fascist. And, I always sing, and Alex, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I was going to ask
you. What was the last thing you heard me say, please?
You were talking about Seth Rich and another name we haven't heard before, and you were describing the DNC.
Sean Lucas.
Yes.
Sorry. You were describing the DNC, the circumstances of the DNC thing, and I guess you haven't been here, but I wanted to ask, do you agree, or you have another point at which he fell from grace? Because I think that was the point when he became a hunted person as opposed to a celebrated person, because he was that before that.
Hillary Clinton literally said in an email to a bunch of generals, why don't we just drone this guy? And that was after the United States had killed 2 U.S. citizens in Yemen, including a minor. So that was a real threat. And the Podesta emails showed how they rigged it against Bernie. And then Bernie, rather than appreciate what Assange did, advocate for him, was completely silent on the issue because he was too busy selling out and campaigning for Hillary. Rather than saying, hey, let me run as an independent and let me acknowledge that she stole the primary from me in these revelations, Bernie sold out at that point. So that was revealing. But that
was the point, or just continue the DNC as you wish.
I was at the DNC, by the way, in 2016 with the Green Party, and there was a lot of angry progressives. There was an opportunity for Bernie to run as independent, and of course, instead it ended up being Jill Stein, and of course, they rigged things against her like they're doing now. But just to tell you who Sean Lucas was, I happened to meet his boss in Miami a few times, Elizabeth Lee Beck. I'm sure you've heard of the Becks. And just like Seth Rich, he was more prominent because I believe in a tweet, Assange offered us some money for information on his mysterious death. That he was a staffer, he had access to information at the DNC. So it's quite possible that both him and Seth Rich were the leaks to WikiLeaks. I don't know for certain. But yeah, there's 2 mysterious deaths right there that the Clinton mob could have been involved with. But yeah, I mean, at one point, Assange said, I wish I had dirt on Trump, because he was coming as an independent. He wanted to get dirt on both of the major parties. As a matter of fact, in 2016, you might remember, he spoke from the Ecuadorian embassy at the Green Party convention. So if it was American, he probably would have voted Jill Stein. But, there was some bourgeois Democrats, obviously non-Bernie-crats, that were upset with Assange and thought that he preferred Trump. But the fact that Trump did not pardon Assange, and that under Trump's regime that they pursued Assange, that says it all. So I think Assange is an independent figure. He's feared by both of the elite-run parties, and he's about truth and transparency and inspiring people to free themselves. He's not the white savior complex. He doesn't see himself as a liberator. He sees the people as being able to liberate themselves when they have the truth and transparency revealed. And he sacrificed his criminal record and admitted to the crime of journalism in Saipan. So I don't see that as a selling out. I see that as a sacrifice on Assange's part.
Oh, so do we.
And the Trump, the Trump people that visited, I mean, for lack of a better word, that visited Assange in the embassy. I mean, you can't blame Assange for hoping that, the Trump presidency the Trump cabinet would try and pardon him. And so I mean I don't think that. Yeah, I agree with you. He's not a partisan person. He's not a Republican anti-Democrat. But you can't blame him for hoping that he could get some kind of a deal where Trump would have let him go. But you had Pompeo. Pompeo was another one saying we should kill him. And Pompeo was his was he Secretary of State?
No, he was the CIA head.
Oh yeah,
under Trump.
Yeah. So so I feel bad, that 14 years of his life lost for journalism, and we're very glad that he is no longer in captivity. We're wondering what the likelihood is that he does continue his work. I don't know. Is that possible, or can he even talk about some of the issues that like the Seth Rich issue that are big deals still? What do you think about what he could do going forward?
I mean, just the fact that they're showing pictures of Assange enjoying life in Australia is a victory and inspirational in a way. Him doing his work of inspiring people, even though he's obviously going through a trauma right now and he needs to transition. He was in a dungeon for 5 years. He was confined to a room for 7 years. And he was in house arrest before that. I mean, so they showed him on the beach on his birthday. They showed him in the forest around Canberra, Australia, with his family, with Stella. The images like that's him continuing to do his work because he's inspiring people to be like, wow, this guy's back on his feet. He's right with his family. This is a victory,
Other than these, have either of you seen a public statement from him? Any kind of because I've seen these pictures, which are happy reunited pictures, but we don't know all the conditions of his release. Many of them maybe have to be secret. And
I know for a fact that he's banned from entering the United States. That's his only restriction. He can move around Australia. He can even go back to England if he wants. That's the only one that I know of. And I also read the court transcripts of what he said in Saipan. So that was a public statement where basically he said, I don't agree with the Espionage Act. It contradicts the First Amendment. I was doing journalism. So basically he defended himself by accepting guilt at the same time because the judge gave him a lot of leeway. And I thought that was a victory. That was a great display of dignity. And so his wife also quoted him in a press conference soon after he arrived in Canberra, in the Australian capital, and said he will always defend victims. He's not afraid. That was her answer, and I think that came right from Julian when they asked, is he going to take over WikiLeaks again? He said he will always defend victims. He's not afraid, but he needs to transition right now. So I think we got to give him some time. He's gone through psychological torture. The UN said that. And just like Alex Saab, when Alex Saab was released to Venezuela, it took some time for him to be interviewed. But, these are both heroes. And I think this was a triumph in these past 6 months, not only for journalism, but for diplomacy. And let's hope diplomacy prevails in Ukraine as well. I know you guys like to go on your tangents, and I'm sure that there's a topic on Ukraine as well. But I believe in diplomacy. And you got to talk to your adversaries. But, when you have cowards that are running the empire or pretending to run the empire like Biden, you don't see images of him sitting down talking to Putin, do you?
No, Putin wants to sit down and talk, but there's no one on the other side to talk to. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, as far as Assange going back into business, the problem is he's in Australia. And Australia is not shy about arresting Australian citizens on the behalf of the USA. So unless he plans to uproot his family, I think this is a semi-retirement for him, unless he plans on relocating, because Australia, that I am aware of, already has one American citizen, or former American citizen and Australian citizen locked up for allegedly spying for China right now. So
what's their name? I want to look into that case.
Dugan. I don't know.
John Mark Dugan, I think.
Yes, he was a former Marine pilot who left the USA, eventually renounced his citizenship and got an Australian citizenship, and apparently also spent time in China at an aviation school, like a flight school, and he was basically more than 10 years later. And this was under Biden, was accused of violating the rules for former military personnel and sharing secrets.
Well, that reminds me of Ken O'Keefe, because he's a former U.S. Marine that renounced his citizenship and became an Irish citizen. But the Irish government didn't arrest him. But that kind of reminds me of Ken O'Keefe, yeah.
Yeah, so basically the Australian government lured him out of China on some sort of job offer, and arrested him when he showed up in Australia.
Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that either.
That was before Albanese, wasn't it? Because Albanese just became Prime Minister of Australia recently.
I want to say this was 1 or 2 years ago. I don't remember the exact date, but it was not super recent. But he's still on house arrest. Last I checked.
Yeah, because Albanese might release him, because Albanese tends to be more progressive than the last PM of Australia, and he also, when he ran, promised that he was going to free Assange, and he did, back channel diplomacy, and he got some criticism. He said, "Hey, why don't you vocally say free Assange now that you're the PM?" But what he was doing back channel diplomacy, and maybe he's doing the same for that gentleman. I definitely want to look into that case. Anybody can, DM me on Twitter, and I'll look into it.
They're part of Five Eyes. Yeah, I mean, they're part of AUKUS, they're part of Five Eyes. I don't see them flinging this back in the USA's face. I think the odds.
Well, Albanese is pro-Israel. There was a recent politician who left the Labour Party of Australia over it. And he's also pro-Ukraine. He sent weapons, I believe, to Ukraine. So I'm not saying I agree with everything Albanese is doing. The Australian regime is very in cahoots with the CIA and other agencies. I don't disagree with that. But I think because of the overwhelming pressure, the campaign to free him, and back channel diplomacy, that's what ultimately freed him.
True, but didn't he slap a fucking $500,000 jet fee right on him? I think Stella Assange did a fundraiser for him. That was like the Australian.
Yeah, I donated to that, and that's already reached the funds that they needed. They actually have an extra 3,000. So I believe it was 500,000, and now they have. Last I checked, their fundraiser raised 503,000. So they've already kept up the money to pay back Albanese and have an extra $3,000 in their pocket, which is great. They need money to get back on their feet. Assange never sold out. So,
yeah, I mean, he should get some restitution for 14 years of his life lost. But so, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing about the way that the lawfare was used to silence Assange and to force him into captivity. It was just so disgusting and dishonest. It was like this Swedish. He got these ex-girlfriends of his to make this claim about not using a condom, and then that allowed them to get some kind of a warrant. And then when he showed up, if he would have showed up for that warrant, right, then he would have been extradited to the United States. And so he didn't want to do that. But
Billy, did you know that? Billy, did you know that one of those? I mean, this was a classic femme fatale scenario, because one of the women that accused him was thrown out of Cuba for being a CIA asset.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Because she was Swedish, but yeah, I mean, this was totally,
I didn't know that. It's not surprising.
It fits perfectly.
Surprised.
Just an observation. Isn't it wonderful how the vassals, eager to please the US, always do the sort of gray legal stuff? I think Australia arrested the Meng Wanzhou when they tried to destroy Hawaii, right? The CFO of Hawaii. They didn't catch her in the US. No, Canada can do that. Here it was the UK, Australia, and Sweden playing the game. Please the US.
So, I mean, the point of all this is that the rule of law doesn't really exist. And so, the ruling dictatorship balances the interests of silencing Assange with the interests of, not exposing themselves as not giving a fuck about the rule of law. So these are both interests they have. Do we want to pretend like we're a legitimate society that cares about following the law? Or do we really just want to get this guy and shut him up? And so they're balancing these things, and it seems like 14 years on, the balance turns out to be, well, he's not that big of a threat. It's more important to pretend that we really care about law, and so we'll just, go like this. But I fully thought that they would continue what they were doing. I thought they were going to extradite him here. They were going to put him in, one of those
maximum security.
Well, they'd give him a trial. Give him a trial that isn't publicized. A trial that nobody has access to because he's a terrorist, right? These laws.
Billy, do you know how many times he was brought up in diplomatic talks, even in interviews? The president of Azerbaijan, they were criticizing him in an interview with how he treated the Armenian minority, and he's like, "Excuse me, how are you going to complain about prisoners that I'm putting away when you have Julian Assange held in London?" this stuff was brought up all the time. It was a huge impediment for Western diplomacy.
With international pressure on the U.S. specifically, and also embarrassment. So that's good. No, that's an explanation for why they changed their mind.
And Snowden, I don't know if you guys heard me when I mentioned Snowden earlier, but Snowden called this a victory as well, what happened with Assange. And interestingly enough, Snowden has always said, I will return the United States in an instant. The moment they take away the Espionage Act, so I can have a proper defense. Stop charging me under the Espionage Act, and I'll return the United States and have a jury. But they refuse to do it.
Unfortunately, the Espionage Act is intact, isn't it? Unfortunately, that's one of the results.
Since 1917. Times were different then, weren't they?
Yeah.
No, I would also the same.
I'd just like to add that U.S. association with Australia goes way back. The CIA and the overthrow of the Gough Whitlam government and Pine Gap and the Pine Gap radar post, and even before that. So I would say that Albanese has to tread lightly in that regard. The other thing to remember is Assange is not WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks can function on its own and should largely function on its own. We shouldn't get to see it as a cult of personality. It's been extraordinarily valuable to me in my exchanges with people, because when you engage them, they say, well, where did you get that? And you just send them something from WikiLeaks. At the head, it says U.S. State Department. It's the document. It's the actual document. So shut the fuck up. Either you think they tampered with the document, which they didn't, or just shut up. The only thing I have to say, and this is on a slightly frivolous basis, about Julian is he should know in advance, because it's in all the travel guides. You cannot raw dog in Sweden. You cannot raw dog in Sweden. Am I right, Ian? Am I right?
I've never looked into raw dogging in Sweden. I'm not a migrant to Sweden, so it's.
No, that's what
I'm unfortunate. I don't know what the slang raw dogging.
I know what the number one product at IKEA is. The number one product at IKEA has got to be condoms.
There you go.
Probably called Bulf or Lidl or some cute Swedish name.
Of. That's how absurd that those accusations were. Because
Can you help me? What is raw dogging? Come
without
on.
condom.
I'm not American.
Not using a condom.
They were coming on
that's raw dogging. Thank you.
I don't know.
Without permission. In Sweden, it is considered a sexual offense to not use a condom without the permission of the other.
Thank you. I was missing the reference.
It's slang, yes. But I mean, to tie this all up, I want to say, I mean, if we consider the two people that the U.S. government was really after even before the DNC leak, even when the Apache video first came out and those Afghanistan and Iraq leaks went out, it was Manning and Assange. Manning was the person who gave Assange who was in communication with Assange, and also the big news outlets that cooperated with WikiLeaks, particularly The Guardian, and Glenn Greenwald was one of the major stars who communicated with them. And they really went after each and every person in the chain. I mean, they got Manning first. They broke the guy. I mean, they feminized him literally. That's a classic torture technique. They completely broke this person.
Well, also, if Greenwald was not in Brazil, he probably
and that's what I was going to mention. I was going to mention the same thing. I mean, I think there's I've never heard him outright say it. I mean, maybe he did. I just didn't hear him say it. But I mean, I don't think it's coincidental that he's hanging out in Brazil and not going through the border control for the U.S.
Noam Chomsky retired in Brazil.
Huh. And by the way, the early 2010s Guardian was a very different magazine. It actually had some teeth. It was establishment, but it could go after dangerous stuff. No longer. It's completely vanilla.
MI5 went through the editorial office with hammers, that famous incident. I think that was the moment when the Guardian changed. They got the hint.
Even the Intercept's sold out. Greenwald left the Intercept. He couldn't handle it anymore.
Yeah, it's complete. Yeah. it's down the drain, that thing.
Yes, and then as far as Assange goes, I mean, yes, I mean for him it's a personal, and his family, for the people who support him, it's absolutely a personal victory to get out of what was effectively 14 years of torture. But at the same time, we can't ignore that I think the U.S. government got what they wanted out of this. No one wants to sacrifice 14 years of their life worrying about drone strikes, literally hiding in an embassy, going to prison for something like 5 years. So, and I think they got, and I think most importantly, and just to be clear, I do not at all blame Assange for taking the deal. I mean, it would have been crazy for him to not take the deal because the pressure would only get worse from there if he didn't. But they did get a legal precedent that they can go. I mean, it's kind of an amazing precedent when you think about that. That U.S. law applies to everybody in the world. That you view via. I mean, it's insane when you think about.
Some of you might remember that there was an assassin that scaled the walls of the embassy, that got caught in the act before he could enter and capture or assassinate Assange, and then somehow escaped. It was something out of a James Bond movie. But yeah, you can imagine all the pressures, right?
Yeah. So
he somehow escaped. No, I didn't know that.
And if we compare, and I want to compare that Manning leak to Assange. I want to compare that to the Pentagon leak, that guy's name I've already forgotten, the airman who was uploading stuff.
Oh, you mean the Pentagon Papers?
Yeah, no, not the Pentagon Papers. No, with Ukraine. More
recently.
Yes, yeah. That big leak, and he wasn't like a do-gooder. He did it to his. He uploaded it to social media to boast to his friends that he knew all this secret stuff about Ukraine. But if you compare how the news media treated that and how they treated the WikiLeaks, I mean, there was a shift. I mean, they really did not touch that Pentagon leak. We all saw like those 4 or 5 slides, but the rest of it, I mean, the media wouldn't even touch it. They wouldn't discuss it. They wouldn't talk about the implications of American personnel and aircraft and drones directly participating in war.
Jack Teixeira, a young airman.
Yes, that was his name. Yes.
And speaking of whistleblowers, who's got the craziest name for a whistleblower ever? I'm talking about recent Reality Winner.
Yeah,
I kept hearing about that. It's like, so somebody won the reality show? What? I don't know.
I thought that was a porn name. That can't be a real name.
I don't know.
But yeah, they got the precedents that they want. They've got the media completely muzzled and under their control. If there's a repeat of those DNC emails, it's not going to get anywhere close.
The New York Times messed up the story because what WikiLeaks did redact, the New York Times forgot to redact. And they went after Assange over it. They should have been one after New York Times, but the New York Times does the bidding for the government. But they mess up stories all the time. How many times has WikiLeaks shown an inaccurate story? Zero.
Yep, it's 100% accurate.
Yeah.
And the big thing about
go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say, just to clear up the whole thing about the redactions too, is that the origin of that story was that WikiLeaks asked the Pentagon if they wished for anything in that leak to be redacted to protect, particularly names, if they wanted anything to be redacted. And the Pentagon, because that violates their policy of not confirming or denying leaks, they just said, no, we won't even comment on it. And so WikiLeaks went ahead and published the leaks because no redactions were even requested. So it's hypocritical to even accuse them of not redacting when the redaction request was denied.
There was a German guy, I can't think of his name. He was a disgruntled employee of WikiLeaks. He also revealed some stuff, and the WikiLeaks tried to warn the government about it. Remember that movie they made about Assange that made him look terrible? That German guy, you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
No, I don't remember.
I can't remember his name.
I remember that there was a real unflattering movie that came out just to increase negative PR towards Assange and towards WikiLeaks.
The big thing is there's not a single, not even one, there is not a single death anywhere as a result.
Okay, I got it. It's called The Fifth Estate, and the traitor of WikiLeaks was Daniel Domscheit-Berg. Forgive my German. I'm probably mispronouncing the last name. But yeah, that was another problem, that WikiLeaks found out this disgruntled employee was going to reveal everything, and they tried to do the right thing and warn the U.S. government. That's not a selling out. That was just being responsible so that people wouldn't get killed. But the U.S. government admitted, even in Saipan, that not a single person died from these revelations.
Not even one. Nobody did.
So, I mean, yeah. So there was a Piers Morgan debate about Assange right after he was released, and there was, there was two people anti-Assange, and then he had a couple of supporters. But the two anti-Assange people were adamant that, some of the things that Assange leaked were not redacted, and it did lead to collaborators in Afghanistan being killed by the Taliban. Now, they cite their only evidence they cite. They don't have any official claims by the U.S. government that was true, but they cite the Taliban themselves for claiming that they looked at the leaks and identified who was who and then executed the people.
Yeah, there are apparently propagandists for the Taliban who won't even give the names of these people that were hurt or killed. Like it's ridiculous.
Well, the thing is that I know for a fact that people who were implicated in that leak were quickly relocated. So it's not to say nobody was put in danger, but there were no deaths. If there were, we would hear. I mean, because if there was even one death, that person's name, he would be a household name. There'd probably be
the front page of every paper.
Yes, there'd be the front page of every paper. Oh, this brave Afghan interpreter or whatever was murdered by the Taliban because.
While I'm thinking about it, Judge Napolitano was one of the pro-Assange guests on this Piers Morgan, and he, he was adamant. He was like, even if somebody a collaborator was murdered because of these leaks, so what? Like this is a right. This is a fundamental.
I would have liked to see Napolitano take that plane to Russia, but Scott Ritter warned him not to. But that would have been interesting if Napolitano made it to Russia.
Yeah, true. Even bigger media spotlight. I think he was Fox News at some point. No, that was a different guy. But even bigger media spotlight than Scott Ritter himself, who is now a big old media figure. Yeah. Can I?
Yeah, he's got a big presence.
Can I ask a question, sort of being devil's advocate, because Christopher is not here to be that. So I'm going to say, in the beginning, so Wikipedia was established 2006. So at least during the War on Terror, as I said, he was kind of a darling. He was at the galas with some megastars and all that. And he seemed like, at least to the Democratic establishment, I see him as an internet utopian. What you say, all classified information should be free, I don't agree with that to one bit, because there's dangerous information. Every country has national secrets. But again, the point at which he became, he fell from, the pinnacle to the pit. He became someone we got to get rid of. Do you agree it was the DNC leak? Because before that, he really annoyed the Bush administration with these Afghanistan war crimes shit. But it was very useful for the Democrats. They thought, oh, here's a tool we can use in a partisan way against the other guys. When it turned out, no, he's actually not political. He's not going to go with one side to the other. That's when they decided this is too dangerous. What do you think, Alex?
Repeat the last part of the question.
Was that the point when the Democratic establishment, so one half of the establishment, said, well, this really isn't useful. This might be a danger to us. It's not a tool we can just wield against anyone we want. Like they did the ICC. It's kind of the similar.
There were three types of Democrats that I perceived at that time. There was the Obama Democrats that didn't want to pursue the prosecution and that thought, okay, we're going to release Manning. We're just going to move on from here. And they were the moderates. Then there was the right-wing bourgeois, elite-run Democrats that were like, no, we need to go after Assange. And then, of course, there was the progressives. Some of them were Bernie-crats that were pissed and like, no, Assange is a hero. Build a statue to him. So those are the three camps that were within the Democratic Party at the time that were conflicting with one another.
But that was the point, right? The DNC email leak. That was the point when, okay, this guy's got to go.
Absolutely, and what he was being charged under was actually for the what was happening in Iraq under the Bush II. But yes, I mean that pissed him off. Where a lot of the Dems said, "Okay, we can't use this, but this is why we want to go after him," kind of thing. Yeah. Okay,
thank you. I think we're all in agreement now. Before we transition away to any other topic, by the way, what do you think about the Russian Navy, I don't know which fleet, mooring at Venezuela at this moment, where there are big elections going on?
I think that the more Russian ships make it to Cuba and Venezuela, the better, because they're protecting those countries from a U.S. invasion. And I'm sure that they're doing it in full cooperation with those governments. They're not coming in as imperialists. They're coming in to protect those countries. And also Putin's showing he means business. You're going to keep arming Ukraine using these other countries, then he's going to retaliate. They literally killed civilians, Russian civilians, on a beach in Crimea, which would have justified a submarine firing from Cuba on Miami Beach. Of course, Putin didn't do it because he's not extreme like these imperialists. But when I see Russia go into Latin America, that's a relief for me because I think he's there as an ally to defend them from a possible U.S. invasion.
I see it the same way.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I want to. We got to mention one thing. Christopher Black is a lawyer who has argued several dozen cases before the ICC. He's technically an ICC lawyer. We forgot to mention that, by the way.
Yeah, Milosevic's defense was one of.
Yeah, Milosevic was one of the people he defended. Yes.
Alex, how do you think?
Billy Bob, your audio went away. You're not muted here, but we can't hear you. We are having an audio issue day. I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's a conspiracy. I just want to say about the ICC, with the exception of Milosevic and Netanyahu, they never went after white guys. They're finally going after a white guy again, which is very hypocritical. And by the way, WikiLeaks in the beginning got the praise of the West when they were showing, African leaders that were corrupt. But as soon as he turned the scope on the West and showed their hypocrisy, then he became an enemy. Africans
call it the International Caucasian Court for a reason. And you remember that he got the interview, Karim Khan, the prosecutor, someone interviewed him and he said, some Western leaders, he was talking about European leaders, but he didn't name them, told them this was a place for African leaders and thugs like Putin, not for people like us. As in when he but his office threatened to go after Netanyahu and Gallant. That's the kind of stuff we got. And immediately they went after Shoigu and Gerasimov. And that thing has gone to sleep. But even when the ICC went after Israel, they did so clumsily. They said it was plausible genocide. Just call it genocide. Yeah. Rule of law, ladies and gentlemen. The current first son and the ex-president are both convicted felons at this point, aren't they? Convicted.
Well, Biden would have been a convicted felon had not the court said that when he brought those documents into that car that he wasn't incapacitated. So according to the courts, the Democrats find so sacred when it comes to Trump, they say he's incapacitated, but he can have the nuclear football? I mean, this is the hypocrisy we're talking about.
Final question on Assange, because this wasn't clear to me last time, and I didn't watch the debate in full, the catastrophic debate, but I was wondering why now. And was there a point in the debate when Assange was brought up? Was this all for a point in the debate, or what?
I'm surprised they didn't bring him up. I'm surprised they didn't bring it up because Biden could have tried to use it to appeal to certain people, but
that's what I thought would happen.
Even worse. But yeah, they completely ignored the issue. It just happened before the debate. You thought they would have brought it up, right?
And they didn't. I
still
don't know why this happened now. Yeah, maybe.
It could just be. I was just saying it's coincidence. It was just the Assange question naturally ran its course with the powers that be, and it was just coincidence that lined up with the debates.
Or he forgot because he had a cold, he had jet lag, he's only awake from 10 till 4. One of those things.
Because the thing is, if you have people assigned to dealing with Assange, if you have, I'm sure there was some office in the CIA assigned to dealing, and probably the State Department, because they work hand in hand, to dealing with the Assange issue, and this came up, and then they talked to the Justice Department, and then it came up to this, the case reached its logical conclusion, and it just happens to be now. It might have had nothing to do with the election. It's entirely possible.
Yeah, I think maybe they wanted to do it before the election was up. Is my audio working yet?
Yes, we can hear you again.
Okay. Yes. I was going to ask Alex, and it's off the Assange topic, but we brought up Venezuela, and they're having that border dispute with, is it Guyana right beneath them?
Yes, I talked to you guys about Guyana, and also presidential elections are coming up at the end of this month.
In Venezuela?
Yes.
Okay. How is Maduro looking?
The opposition is divided as usual. The Chavistas are the most organized, most united group, so I predict that they're going to win. This is not regional elections like I observed a couple of years ago. This is presidential. So we have to wait a couple more years to see if a lot of those mayors that were part of the opposition, were still a minority, would reverse back to the Chavista control. We shall see. I'm not going to be able to observe this time, but some comrades of mine are. So I'll wait to hear back from them. But as far as I'm concerned, it's the same electoral system. It's been that way for 20 plus years. Jimmy Carter himself said it was democratic, more democratic than the United States. So you have a lot of the press in Venezuela that's hostile to Maduro, but the people are seeing beyond the lies. And it's democratic society, and I believe the majority will go with the Chavistas, with the socialist government.
Are they going to be able to negotiate any kind of deal with Guyana regarding all those resources that were newly discovered? And what's going on with the newly elected president of Guyana?
So I haven't been paying attention lately what's going on with Guyana. I do know that Ali was very pro-West, pro-U.S., and was doing the bidding of the U.S., and that the president prior to him was the opposite. He was negotiating with Venezuela. So this new president coming in, I don't know much about him. I haven't been paying attention lately, but hopefully he'll have a more diplomatic stance and work with Venezuela to reach some type of deal.
Yeah, the presence of a Russian rocket cruiser and a nuclear sub can clear the mind, I think, when dealing in diplomacy.
Well, the thing is, the British sent their fleet to Guyana to back them up a few months ago. You remember that? And so now Russia's saying, hey, we can show our support for our buddies as well. And I think that's fair.
He was on a pretty heated discussion on Hard Talk. Hard Talk's that BBC interview show, and that was a couple months ago. But it got kind of heated with him and the interviewer. But it just seems like the West is going to use him and manipulate him into, serving Western interests, which is basically to harm Venezuela. But yeah, I wish they would just negotiate and come to some understanding, but they need to have both anti-imperialists in both governments. And right now, I think the Guyana guy is a pro-imperialist, which is a problem. But
and Milei in Argentina, his own people hate him so much. At first, he kept meddling in Venezuelan affairs and other leftist governments' affairs and being critical of those governments. But now he can't do that. He's got to focus on defending himself because all the people are rising up against Milei. He's destroying the Argentine economy. There's thousands of people that are crossing the border to Chile to buy food to survive. It's just complete chaos down there. This is what happened when the right takes over. When they took over in Ecuador, they brought it over to the narcos. When they sold out, after Lenin Moreno, the Ecuadorian regime is their economy's crumbling. The Argentine, and what lo and behold, the leftist progressive governments, their economies are all flourishing, and they're working with Russia and China, and they're rebuilding despite of sanctions, especially sanctions against Venezuela. So that gives me some hope.
Yeah, Honduras too, and Central America became a narco state as soon as they threw Zelaya out of power. Narco state, CIA.
Yeah,
I had a coworker in the Army Reserves, and he was deployed down into Honduras. And he said, he'd be at the beach and you'd just have bodies washing up. It was a pretty regular occurrence. It's crazy. But
when it comes to Milei, as long as we have the Latin American expert here, I still want to stick with one more topic here. But Milei, after he got all that, IMF loan stuff, he still turned to China. Can you restore that currency swap thing? Because we really in the shitter. But the inflation rate, the dumpster diving, it's really horrific. It's worse than, I think Turkey is the highest in the Europe region when it comes to inflation. And he wrecked Argentina. Probably.
Again, who's sanctioning Argentina? Nobody.
So it's completely free to trade.
Yeah, so where's justification for people eating out of the trash now? When Argentina used to be a top economy in Latin America with industry and all of that, while Brazil's progressing under Lula, it's such a huge contrast, right? But Milei, who pretends to be a nationalist, he's a total sellout to the United States. He's trying to change their currency to a dollar, and he's destroying their economy.
Yeah, completely Americanizing it. But the actual question I wanted to get to you was Haiti, because I haven't kept up with the news this week at all. But I read that the Prime Minister is not elected, appointed by these international panel, went to Washington, D.C. I read this, while basically Kenyan police were I think, patrolling his capital in Haiti. Like, what is the latest situation that you're aware of in Haiti?
Well, honestly, I've been so busy, I haven't been able to pay attention lately to Haiti and Guyana, but I am familiar with their history, so I can tell you this. When Aristide in the early 2000s was ousted from power in Haiti in the second coup, you know where they sent him? To Africa. I believe they sent him to Kenya. But this is how the CIA works. They're bringing in Africans and importing them to Haiti, and these are the sellouts that they're using as their stooges to try to meddle in the affairs of Haiti. So that's probably what's going on.
Yeah, no, I heard there's like 1,000 Kenyan, mercenaries or soldiers patrolling the streets of Port-au-Prince, to protect the wealthy neighborhoods.
While there's an uprising at home.
Sellouts is the absolute correct term.
Yeah, Ruto's got big problems in Kenya.
Back at home,
for easy money. He's looking for easy money.
Yeah, I don't think most Africans appreciate a sellout government.
They would call them sellouts. Yep.
What about Bukele? Alex, talk about Bukele. El Salvador.
So Bukele has rounded up a lot of there's class warfare. So I can tell you what I know about Bukele is that he's rounded up a lot of poor and working class youth who were not involved in crime and just randomly thrown them in jail and say, look how I'm fighting crime. So Bukele is a total fake. He's kind of like Guaido, but at the same time, he's not like Guaido of Venezuela because he'll make statements like, oh, the United States just bought oil from Venezuela. Why can't we? So sometimes he's like a nationalist, like Bolsonaro, for example. I didn't like him at all, but sometimes he acted like a nationalist in a good way. For example, when the U.S. asked Bolsonaro of Brazil, hey, can we use your territory to invade Venezuela? He said no, and they ended up using Colombia instead with that disaster before they had a change of president. So Bukele is a complex figure. He's not always willing to sell out. You might have heard of Rafael Trujillo of the Dominican Republic back in the 60s. He was assassinated by the CIA. Even though he was the U.S. guy, he was a fascist. Yeah. But then he started, working on his own independently. A lot of former allies, so-called allies of the U.S. empire ended up turning into the U.S. enemies, right? So that might happen with Bukele as well.
Yeah, so this whole tough on crime, the crime has gone way, way down. That's mostly his cultivated image?
No, I think it's not what the Sandinistas did. The Sandinistas in Nicaragua in the 2000s brought down crime because they told foreign criminal gangs from Honduras and El Salvador, they said, you come in this country, we don't have the death penalty, but we're extrajudicially kill your ass, So they stopped coming in, and then they were able to stabilize their economy, and crime went down. But you didn't see that with Bukele. It's not so much that he stabilized his economy. He just rounded up all these people and say, oh, look what I did. No, it's not the same situation.
What's the relationship between Bitcoin and the El Salvador government? Were they the ones that are using Bitcoin as a national currency?
There's only two countries I know of that are using Bitcoin to fight U.S. sanctions, Nicaragua and Venezuela. And the sanctions against Nicaragua and Venezuela are pretty bad, against Cuba as well. But I don't know if Cuba's taking part in Bitcoin. They're strict about their currency. But it's just Nicaragua and Venezuela that I know of.
Have you heard of Max Kaiser? Max Kaiser, he had a show on RT, the Kaiser Report.
Kaiser Report, I remember this.
And he's a big libertarian. But he actually lives in El Salvador, and he's a big proponent of the El Salvadorian government because of their embrace of, I think, not just crypto, but I think specifically Bitcoin. But he said that it's just a mecca for Western expats. Like Western expats are moving there in droves because it's so friendly to, U.S. dollars and also Bitcoin. But I'm
not an expert at Bitcoin, but I'll tell you this: it's a double-edged sword because it could be used for good, fighting U.S. sanctions, right? But it could also be used for what you just said, to bring expats in, and they could corrupt the government. So yeah, I mean, it's probably a double-edged sword.
Or take money out. I mean, there's a reason China banned it the fuck out. Yep.
Yeah. I just want to add one anecdote. My son-in-law is a contractor, and he has a bunch of kids who work from, not kids now, they're in their late 20s and 30s, but they're all playing pool over at his house. And I went down to the basement to talk to them. First thing they asked me is what I thought of Bukele, because they're from El Salvador. And then they gave me an earful of how much they admired what he had done, because all of their relatives back in El Salvador now felt safer. It was easier to walk the streets at night. Some of them had little stands where they sold stuff, and they were all behind Bukele. And the other thing I understand is he locked up 66,000 kids, a lot of them with MS-13 tattoos on their foreheads, which is kind of a dead giveaway. But did you know that MS-13 started in California? A lot of people thought it started from America, was imported, but it started in the U.S. It was exported. Yeah,
Gotcha. But Carlo's point is crime did go down because criminals were also locked up.
The point, I just want to say, he's also gone through a kind of quasi-judicial process to release some of the people he initially arrested. So I don't know. He is a mixed figure. I listened to a speech he gave before something like the Heritage Foundation, and he thought he was going to be highly praised, but there was a lot in his speech that the right-wingers did not feel comfortable with, especially the nationalism dimension, I think. No bow down. I'm not bowing down sort of thing is kind of what Ruto sounded like in his initial stages.
So he's not a Malay sellout. He's not a Malay level sellout. He's just like a moderate sellout.
Yeah.
But Malay was, he was such a big sellout when he first won the election, right? He's like, he was totally in the paradigm of this liberal, libertarian, anarcho-capitalism mindset where you see everything as it's like anti-authoritarianism versus freedom, right? That's the paradigm that they exist in. And so he's like, we're going to be 1,000% with the West and with freedom, and we're going to oppose these authoritarian states that are, a nightmare for humanity, which is China.
Well, Torrijos of Panama was a progressive nationalist. Then he died in a mysterious plane crash, and guess who took over? Yeah. Noriega. Noriega was supposed to be the U.S.'s guy that would do all the bidding, that would never sell out. And then he started doing the things the United States didn't like. He started talking to Cuba, and then they ended up extracting Noriega from that country as well.
Asset that went rogue even before Saddam. Sorry, Billy Bob. Yeah, you were saying.
Well, I was just pointing out that it was stated earlier how Malay has already had to go back on his rhetoric. So he was all pro-West, anti-China, but yeah, he had to go back to China hat in hand and beg that this currency swap continues. And of course, China, was gracious, but this libertarianism it's such a silly ideology, and the fact that it's got so much, so many adherents here in the West, and that one of these nut jobs actually got the presidency in Argentina. Actually, Maduro had a great quote, which I will find shortly, just describing Malay's job to a T. Basically, just handing over Argentina to the imperialists. But I'll find that.
It's possible to be a progressive libertarian and a progressive Catholic in Latin America. It's a complex region, but the type of libertarianism that Malay talks about is definitely North American type. Yeah.
Yeah, the American Libertarian Party, he was their darling. They loved him until the point when he went to Israel to the Wailing Wall. Thank goodness that's one thing that doesn't mix. The whole rabid Zionism and the U.S. libertarian strain, at least that's something that doesn't mix.
He went to Spain and started crying. Malay saw a portrait of himself. He's so full of himself, he got emotional. Yes, but about himself. I mean, Al Capone cried when he saw operas. Doesn't mean that they're not psychopaths.
He also cried with the Pope. He's like the best faithful in every religion in the world. He cried with the Pope. He cried with the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem.
And he has a love affair with his dog, who's like
his dead
dog. The clone. Yeah, he had so much money, he cloned his dead dog, and he said verbatim, and he was not joking. I saw the speech. He said, "My political advisor is my cloned dog."
I forgot his name, Lord or something.
So Maduro said. He's got a message to Javier Milei. You were put in Argentina to destroy the rule of law, destroy the state, destroy all social and labor rights, destroy the national economy, and to colonize Argentina and deliver it on its knees to U.S. imperialism. You are a fatal mistake. I couldn't have said it better.
Absolutely.
Very well said. Damn, I wish I had some more Latin America. I unfortunately, until the last moment, I didn't know, Alex, that you would be our guest, so I prepared.
It's fine. I mean, Alex Saab, for example, he was a Venezuelan diplomat that I spoke to you guys about before. And he happened to have, as part of his international legal team, the same lawyer as Assange, Garzón, a great judge from Spain, who retired from the judgeship to become a lawyer for activists and things like that. And so Alex Saab's case was similar to Assange's. It was a diplomat who was fighting U.S. sanctions and who was captured in a third country, just like Assange was illegally, and was tortured just like Assange was. And so within 6 months, almost 6 months to the day, Alex Saab was freed. I even said it when they freed Saab. I said Assange is next. And it's what happened. And it's a victory. We need to cherish those victories. As anti-imperialists, we have a lot of defeats, and we need to continue the struggle. Leonard Potier was just denied parole. So the struggle continues. You have Native American activists, right? Indigenous rights activists that are still being persecuted.
And as Mr. Doherty pointed out, Mumia too.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Todd.
Assata Shakur is still in Cuba. She still can't come back to this country. I mean, it goes on and on.
Yeah, sometimes we think that their power is absolute, that they're hegemonic, but they're constrained. And these victories, like with Alex Saab, like with Assange, demonstrates that their power isn't absolute, that we can have victories. But it doesn't mean that the rule of law actually exists because we have all these other cases, that demonstrate otherwise. But it's great to celebrate these victories. And we're very happy for Assange and his family.
Yes, we are. If you please, shall we go over to Banderistan or Country 404, country
yes.
found, just to at least get it in, because there's a big wind of change. I hate that Scorpion song. A sea change in the Western public opinion. I'd like to draw your attention. This is Stephen Bryan. He's very well tied into the Washington establishment, including national defense, cyber defense, and even he has come to the point sometime this week, again, I didn't collect that much news, that this is going to end in surrender. The Ukrainian army will collapse, as opposed to negotiations, not just because of Zelensky's refusal to negotiate, but also because of the numerous shortcomings in hardware and especially manpower. And then we get to the next one, which it made me chuckle. I think it made the rounds on social media that, this guy, the Green Goblin, he's not corrupt. Ukraine is not corrupt, for many hundreds of billions of US dollars and euros, and also to join the European Union. But he's going to be told at next Tuesday's summit in Washington, you're too corrupt to get into NATO. That carrot's actually rot. And now just to have like a fun illustration of that final point, I want to play this cute video that Olga, a Russian trollster, put together, and let's just enjoy it together with the max volume. This happened at the Council of Europe. I don't know which one, but not too long ago. I mean, that's it, but it's like last year's NATO summit at Vilnius, when he was like that gardener, completely alone at the side of the stage, which made, viral photos. Guys, this is happening. I think it's coming sooner than later. And there's nothing more, as you said, the U.S. thinks it can do whatever.
Well, Juan Guaido is going to be the next president of Ukraine, right? Once they oust Zelensky, they're going to try to bring another puppet, right? Why not Guaido? They'll extract him from Miami.
Him or Tikhanovskaya, or they'll all end up in a council house somewhere in Miami. I don't know. All three.
Did we talk last episode? Did we talk about Azov warning Zelensky not to negotiate?
Oh shit! I actually had that from a Russian outlet, and I don't have it anymore. The snippet.
Yeah, these Nazis are so insignificant, but they could stop a president from negotiating. That's power right there.
They got a general fired in one day, one afternoon.
Exactly. Yeah, Sokol, I think, which I remember.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, that's power.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. You said the U.S. thinks it can do whatever it wants around the globe. There is no bigger signal than this whole Ukraine debacle that, no, you can't. You just can't.
It's a big mess. I don't know how Biden's going to deal with it till, next year. And, I mean, who's going to replace him? Alex, who's replacing Biden in the next – who's going to win the next election?
I don't always make predictions, and I'm not saying because I want it to be, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be Trump.
Yeah, it looks like he's getting backing of the establishment that he didn't have last time, and that they're more tolerant of another Trump presidency than they
Beware
were.
of his VP pick. Trump will pick somebody that's totally establishment.
I'm afraid you're right, and that'll be a huge signal that he is sold out, and who were they? Who was the big? One guy. Shoot, he's a congressman. That's who I think it's going to be. What is his name? Not Rubio and not Nimrata.
Oh God, not Rubio. Hope not.
No, fuck Nimrata. Maybe Vivek.
Ted Cruz.
No.
Trump assaulted his wife.
And
Vance.
JD Vance actually isn't bad on Ukraine. And that's why the pro-Ukraine faction of the establishment really still doesn't want Trump in. Because that seems like if Trump does get in, especially if JD Vance is his VP,
they hate
that'll
him, yeah.
signal an end
Vance,
to the
okay.
Ukraine project.
Yeah, it's JD Vance and Moscow Marjorie. That's the Ukrainian sort of they're grouped together.
Yeah, I guess I'm still the minority. You know, I've said this in the last show, but I am very sure it's going to be Biden. I mean, as far as replacing, I mean, Ben and I talked about it a little bit before the stream started, but they've had, if the plan was to replace Biden, they could have done it a year ago. They could have done it 6 months ago. And not just literally boot him out. I don't mean boot him out of the White House. They could just say he's not going to run again. He's a great president. He's literally the greatest president we've had since Reagan. I mean, they could say whatever they wanted.
It's really
and
late.
then just have him. Then just say he's not going to run again. He's just he needs to go back to his family and nurturing Hunter's crack addiction. You know, I mean, they could have said whatever. And they could have said it a year ago. So I think the plan was always to run him. And not to say I discount that there's dissent against it. I'm sure I don't think it's theater. I think it's true that there are people within the Democratic establishment that are unhappy with that choice. But I still think the choice has been made, and they're going to, unless something changes, unless that dissent gets too large. The plan is to run Biden, and the plan is for Biden to win.
Also, the allies across the sea, they've gotten even more louder, saying, "Jesus, you're running this against Trump." That really dislodged some people. But
you answered one of my questions, because one of my questions to you, Ian, was going to be: do you think there could be a legitimate internal power struggle within the Democratic establishment?
Looks like there is one.
And the question is, I mean, has that struggle been won? I mean, or does that struggle continue? And is it possible that the anti-Biden faction is going to have success?
I don't think I wouldn't. Yeah. Well, I would agree, but I wouldn't call it a power struggle because the hierarchy is established. Because a power struggle implies insurrection, which means one faction overpowers. It's a power struggle. But I don't think there's a power struggle. I do think there is dissent. There are non-trivial people. There are donors in particular who are just
that's
unhappy.
The constituency,
and there are media outlets that are unhappy enough to publicly say we should not put this corpse through the election again.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's an interesting nuance that you have there, because I would consider that a power struggle, but you see it as just some dissent and not a real drag out fight over
the reason I don't categorize it as a power struggle, because a power struggle implies if you don't win. So like Billy Bob, if you were in the Democratic Party and you were just like, I am dead set on Biden not being our pick, the implication is that if they don't listen to you, then you just take your ball and go home. But I don't think, and that's why I say it's not a power struggle, because if they lose, these people are not going to take their ball and go home, and they're certainly not going to switch to Trump.
And there's people saying Bernie should take over instead of Biden. It's like, why is that always got to be old white guys? I'm sorry, but
well, Bernie's even older than Biden. He's in his mid-80s, if I recall correctly, and he's a sellout.
Didn't they make fun of Brezhnev's age at the time? Brezhnev was a youngster compared to these guys, Also, as you mentioned before the show, I think you made the analogy of a GoFundMe. There's real legal and financial challenges because so many donations have been made to the Biden campaign. At this point, they'd have to all be returned. They can't just be transferred over to the next whoever Democratic candidate it is. That's a real issue. Yeah, that's why they should have done this a lot earlier if they were serious.
It's like raising a GoFundMe. Like, hey guys, I'm going to build a deck in my backyard. And then a bunch of people donate money to me to build a deck. Then I can't legally, I can't say I changed my mind. I'm going to, add a new bedroom. I cannot legally spend the money beyond the scope of what people donated it to me for. So if it was
the emperor has no clothes, like they're just pretending that he has clothes when obviously he doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that if they donated to run Biden, they either have to run Biden or they got to return the donations and start over. And that's, like Ben was saying, that's a huge issue.
I would still be shocked if you are correct, but definitely the initial tumult to get Biden to step down has subsided. Biden has declared he's going to be the candidate, and so there's definitely a lot less.
New debate in September. I can't wait.
He's confirmed. Did they schedule one?
No, he said he'll be there at the debate in September, the second.
They'll probably cancel it. There's no way. I don't know. But.
Well,
yeah, it'll have to be midday, I think.
The big thing is that the issue is, because I'm sure you've seen this as well. Everybody on this show has seen this on social media and maybe with people in person. I've not seen even one left-leaning or liberal person who is a Biden supporter. I've not seen even one say, you know what, I'm going to do a protest vote. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing a protest vote or boycotting. If you're because that's how democracy is supposed to work. If everybody just votes for their party, no matter what, then it's not even a democracy. It's not even an election. It's just a head count.
Achilles' heel is Gaza, right? Before Gaza, there was a lot of left-leaning people that said, no, we're going to vote for Biden. But after Gaza, that's it. He's Genocide Joe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we will not know because I think there are certain demographic groups that are important to the Democratic Party because really, for Republicans, as long as you don't irritate the evangelicals, you're probably okay, right? But with Democrats being, the racially diverse, the friendly to minorities party, the problem is that you've got these enclaves, these big enclaves of Arabs, of people from West Asia. You have a lot of people who would actually get mad enough to just sit out the election and say, you know what, you're Genocide Joe. I'm not going to support your ass. And because I think you're white, upper middle class, freaking hipster college students will vote Biden no matter what. They'll say, oh, he's the lesser of two evils. They'll say that to the grave. But
by the way, you guys think Steimer's not going to support Israel, right? The new PM of the UK, right?
It's going to be he is. Of course he is.
But I think some of those minority votes might sit out the election. However, I think we're at the point where the winner of an election is predetermined. I mean, I think at this point, because there's too many stakeholders. The problem is that, and I said this in the previous show, the USA it's not even just the USA anymore. It's a global. When you're an empire, you have stakeholders. You have shareholders in other countries. You have European shareholders. You have NATO shareholders. They can't look these people in the face and say, this guy who is literally worse than Hitler could be the next president. That I don't see that as being a tolerable thing.
So Ian makes a convincing case, and his case rests upon the fact that our election is not a real election, is that they can control the outcome of the election. And based on that, since they can control the outcome of the election, they're going to control who wins.
But they don't want another insurrection.
Well, I would say that there's logistical considerations. Like, it's logistically difficult. It's dangerous to rig an election, to a certain degree. And you're always afraid of whistleblowers and if somebody of it getting out and being, publicized. So it's dangerous.
But national ones, you're right. It's more complex.
Well, look at what they did with that whole so-called insurrection. Who are let's look at social media companies. Who are the two prominent figures they kicked that all the social media giants in unison kicked off? They kicked off Trump and they kicked off Alex Jones. I think that was a test. That was to shift to shift the Overton window. And also it was a test. Because Alex Jones, Trump, they booted when he was no longer sitting president. He was a private citizen, but he's still a major figure. And they also booted Alex Jones, which I think, because they deliberately picked someone who is extremely controversial, to say the least. But he's still a major media figure. So I think that's almost unprecedented to take someone with such a large audience and say, you know what, we don't like what you say. We're just going to cancel you off the airwaves. You don't have free speech, but it's okay because a corporation said you don't have free speech, not the government. So I think they picked such because Alex Jones is an asshole. right? No one's going to say he's not an asshole. But they picked that guy because they can do it to less, because, that once you do it with the most controversial person,
then you can do it to the gray zone.
Exactly.
Well, they did it with the Uhuru 3 because they're considered fringe black nationalists. They're actually not black nationalists by the strict definition. But yeah, I mean, they go after groups because they think, okay, they're fringe, they're going to get away with it. But they're setting dangerous precedents. And also, Assange wasn't that famous before 2010. They even considered him a fringe. That they go after WikiLeaks, but they actually got more prestige from them being persecuted, and that changed the dynamic. So,
yeah, Trump got prestige from this whole thing as well.
Sandy Hook, that's stooping pretty low. That's just the lowest of the low.
No.
That was low, and that's what they got him for.
Might be, what he did with Sandy Hook.
Well, even
what did he say? He said crisis actors. Wasn't that?
Well, you say enough crazy things, you're going to be right sometimes. But yeah, he was totally wrong about that. I mean, you say enough things, something will be right. But he's a nutcase.
But the thing is that if you look deep into that case, and here's why I find the Alex Jones case concerning as a precedent, because if you look at the really extreme things, the most extreme statements that were made, that what got him sunk, that got that defamation lawsuit going, was not things he said, because he did say stuff about crisis actors, but the more extreme statements were stuff that guests on the show said. So when you look at it, if we move beyond just of, Alex Jones, he made kind of a nonsensical conspiracy theory. If you're willing to look beyond that, it's basically setting a precedent that if you're us and you bring a controversial guest on who says controversial things, it's on you, even to entertain.
Or let's say you sat down with Vladimir Putin for an interview.
He repeatedly said that Sandy Hook was a false flag. The people were actors. Everyone was actors. That man, if my daughter had been killed like that, believe me, he wouldn't have lived for that trial. That motherfucker, what he did. That's unconscionable. That's beyond the pale. I don't care. You can talk all the legalese you want, but that is just...
But we're just looking at it from a precedent that they're absolutely going to use.
And he did it for profit. He knew he was lying. He's not crazy. He knew he was lying.
So
he did it for the money.
Yep, and it was completely wrong. But I think the point that Ian was making, you can be guilty by guest, by association. Let's say you sit down with Vladimir Putin for an interview, like Tucker Carlson did, and suddenly, based on this case law, look, if he said something, you're guilty. That's the issue.
And the other precedent here is that Alex Jones is the private citizen and Alex Jones is the brand are two separate things, but the court ruled that no, we can go after, because under normal circumstances, when a media company screws up, it's the media company's assets that are seized. The people involved just go, oh, well, I guess I don't have a company anymore, and that sucks.
1.1 billion.
Yes, they went after every dime the dude had, which, I'm sorry, but it does not matter what he said or how much you dislike him as a person. The thing is, as a precedent, that means anybody.
Let me thank our guest. He's got to go. Thanks so much, Alex, for joining us. We'll definitely have you back to talk more, but we appreciate your expertise on the South American issues, on the Assange issue, and we will see you very soon.
Yeah.
Is he frozen?
Thanks, Al.
I think he is. Yeah, I'll remove from the
time. So I was gonna, on this topic that we're discussing, I want to make the point about the next quite hot spot. We could get a regional war in West Asia if Israel decides to invade Lebanon and do an offensive against Hezbollah. The Houthis, the Afghanistanis, the Iraqis, the Syrians all said they would help Lebanon and help Hezbollah. So that could very quickly go into a regional war. And from there, things could even get going, in the South China Sea and in Eastern Europe. And so if there is a large-scale global conflict like this, the information space will definitely be locked down. And so these are all measures that will help the establishment to lock down the information space and keep voices of dissent, from dissenting. And so I think we're all, Ian's exactly right to talk about these as precedents and tools that will be used in the event of, a real desire by the establishment to shut people like even our small show up and threaten us, hey, if we keep on with our show, you know, you're going to lose your livelihood. We're going to come after you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And I don't want to bring up January 6th specifically because the problem.
He got immunity from that.
Well, not just that, but I mean the people specifically, and what's going to happen, because I do think Biden's going to win the election. And I want to say what happened, the social media bans, the January 6th thing, that was testing the waters, done on a relatively small scale. But I think we're going to see something bigger than that following this, because the whole thing with the January 6th thing, and I remember because I still had Alexa, I still had, what's that stupid little device called that was connected to Amazon's Alexa. I forget what it's called, but I had that in my house. So I'd get the news. I'd wake up to the news every morning. And I remember the media going through this phase, like the first couple of weeks after it happened, like they were cycling through different words. Like first they're calling it a siege. And it was very funny because it made me imagine like people setting up trebuchets and throwing rocks at the Capitol building. My whole thing about that is that just and I think Putin actually described it well. You know, there were people who were upset and they went to the Capitol to say they were upset. I mean, I'm fine with prosecuting people. Like if you go there and, you know, just because you're upset because your candidate lost doesn't mean you can go punch a cop or destroy things. I'm fine with if an individual person committed an actual crime, it's fine to punish him for that crime. But they locked up hundreds of people who had just been there for 10 minutes for, you know, an Instagram post and then left for, you know, I mean, that was very clearly priming. That was meant to prime American audiences to consider it acceptable to have political prisoners.
Two things. Carla. I've been to the Capitol many times to film demonstrations, to tape demonstrations, and they arrest you for any fucking thing they please, because they have all these laws in effect because the Capitol is like sacred ground. Same with Lafayette Park outside of the White House, the whole thing. Those laws were applied legally to those demonstrators. Number two, all I hear from the fucking right is, well, no one was arrested for the you know, burning Starbucks and the Antifa stuff and all. Actually, that's not true. 14,000 people have been prosecuted for those crimes. But the exception, the thing you have to remember, this is the Capitol. General laws don't apply. They have specific laws. Look, you know, you get into a shoving match with the sergeant of arms at the Capitol, like I did once, you're in big shit, you know? And I was lucky to get out of it. But the thing is,
it's hallowed ground.
It's the hallowed ground. Yeah. It's security. There's a security dimension. It's very intense.
No, I mean, we have to admit, though, that the media portraying it as an insurrection, or like, I mean, saying that was meant to overturn the election, or that there were even news stories saying they were trying to steal the nuclear football, like they were going to nuke. I don't even know what they were going to do with the nuclear football.
Now we're talking about the news. And which news are we talking about? News to snooze. I mean, I'm talking about the actual law that they applied. And those laws are in place. They're there. They got convicted.
Well, and that's one of the things about the rule of law. It's like they can always find some reason to you know, charge somebody for something if there's a political will.
I would even compare it. I would compare it to when Governor Reagan of California, when the California Senate voted on more gun control, and Governor Reagan signed it in, and the Black Panthers did their protest at the state capitol. And they showed up with guns who were in compliance with the law at the time, unloaded firearms, and did their big protests. I mean, that was probably also a trap, because they could have stopped those guys when the Black Panthers showed up. They could have just stopped them at the door. You're not going one step further. But they did the same thing as on January 6th. They let them in. All these pissed off Black Panthers came in with their guns, and then they took the scary photos and said, look, these scary black guys are going to come and murder your babies if we don't pass this legislation. I think they got duped similarly to how January 6th guys later got duped, because if they don't want you to go into the Capitol, they can stop you they can stop you from going to the Capitol. They
I'll just add, but I don't remember them.
The police were overwhelmed. I've been down there a number of times, and that day the police were overwhelmed. With the Black Panthers, the FBI bided their time, and they killed them off one by one, especially the leaders. Okay, that's a big different thing. Not one of those white little fuckers that went down there on January 6th has been killed by the FBI, as far as I know. Not even the ones who had vans full of guns. Okay? None of that happened. None of that happened.
I leave this to you.
Capitol is one of the most
matter. Please don't explode.
If you know the crowd was infiltrated with FBI. If you're not fucking stupid, don't do it. You know, they're obviously the leaders of protest that were giving speeches. They knew the FBI was in the stands. All those elites know that. They know who the FBI people are. So they just set those fuckers up. I don't care if you're that stupid, then fuck you. You know?
That's a shift. But anyway, all I want to say is I don't remember the media cycle, but I do remember Jamiroquai, the Buffalo shaman guy, sitting in the big chair and being in the special places. That's the one thing that stuck to me from January 6th, where, you know, he wasn't supposed to be. Like, he was the photograph. He was the face of this whole thing. I had some other, like, military-industrial topics lined up, but I don't think we need to fit it in today.
We're a pretty good stuff. Is there any other thoughts we want to end with before? Because we're
I mean, I agree that January 6th was like a psyop, so to speak, and it, you know, to call it an insurgency or an attempt to keep Trump in power was just that's ridiculous. I mean,
that's just newspeak.
It was angry people, sharing their frustration and anger, and so the ones that broke the law, they deserve to get punished, but
we talk about.
We will see if it has any impact on November. I know me and Ian have a disagreement, and we will find out.
Yes, we will find out
very, very shortly. Carlo, any last words?
Well, I was just want to say, I mean, we got to avoid the newspeak. Last week we were awash in the word wedge issue. That's newspeak. We got to be careful not to be caught up in that sort of thing. Insurrection, I don't really know. I don't know what the legal definition would be. But obviously they weren't charged as insurrectionists. The charges are laws that are in place for the not only the Capitol, but the White House, the Pentagon, any place you want to go. And believe me, I've been in those areas, and they're highly restricted. You can't fuck around there. You know, I've seen people. I've seen hundreds of people marched off in handcuffs.
I would just say that the laws are in place to protect the oligarchy, right? To protect the rule of the capitalist
ultimately,
And so I don't really care if somebody breaks the law. That doesn't make them a bad person in my book. It depends. You know, it's all relative. But just because they're breaking laws doesn't get me excited. Because I don't think the laws are legitimate usually, and they're always misused. They're misapplied too when they go to charge people. That's lawfare.
Yeah, I know.
But we can spend another hour. Instead, we will wrap up. It's almost 2 hours past our normal start time. But we'll meet up on Tuesday. Thank you, viewers. Thanks again to Alex, and then thank my regular panel guests, my panel hosts here. So we'll see you on Tuesday. See you then.
Have a good week.